All right, welcome to the first of its kind, world-changing manufacturers network. Lisa Ryan has her ears to the ground and her heart in the game. Get ongoing education and new connections right here with Lisa and the Manufacturers Network. Buckle your seat, listen, and spread the word. Here's Lisa.
Hey, it's Lisa Ryan. Welcome to the Manufacturers Network podcast. Excited to introduce our guest today, Clay Martin. Clay is the founder of Isla Talent. He's been recruiting manufacturing talent from Puerto Rico for over a decade, no visas needed, and no red tape. So Clay, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lisa. I appreciate it.
So share with us a little bit about your background and what led you to doing what you do.
Sure. First, I want to say thanks for taking my LinkedIn request, my message. I know you get bombarded with a lot of people, and I just thank you because I spent a lot of time on LinkedIn. So thank you. Yeah. So I started my career right out of college. I was in the Peace Corps, served 4 years in Latin America with indigenous groups, and that kind of spun me off to end up being an entrepreneur. A lot of people might not think that from the Peace Corps. I learned a lot about taking risks and starting projects from the ground up. And I eventually found myself working with migrant workers in my late 20s. And that kind of led me to working with job seekers from Puerto Rico, and eventually started my own business recruiting job seekers from Puerto Rico for the blue collar industry and specifically manufacturing.
Now, do you live in Puerto Rico, or what's the connection with Puerto Rico?
So I do spend a good amount of time every year in Puerto Rico. I go back and forth. I have boots on the ground there, team members that work for me down there, but I do not live there. I've thought about it, but it's currently not in the cards.
Yeah, it is a beautiful part of our country.
It really is. Yeah, it is. And a lot of people are moving down there for tax benefits and things like that, but that's just not something that I'm looking to do right now.
So what do you think? When you talk about leaving a beautiful place like Puerto Rico and coming to mainland United States, what is motivating Puerto Rican workers to seek manufacturing jobs on the mainland?
Sure. The economy in Puerto Rico has struggled for some time. Tourism is one of the biggest parts of their economy. And so that has been affected over the past years. Hurricane Maria, which I believe was in 2017, that definitely was a big hit to their economy, and especially tourism. I love the people of Puerto Rico. They're hard workers, but the jobs the manufacturing jobs here, what they make here is definitely not as much as they could make in Puerto Rico. A job here that pays $18 to $20 an hour in Puerto Rico might make $9, $10, $11 an hour. And that's one of the motivators, is to come here and work, whether it's seasonal or full-time, and send money back. Or some people move to the States permanently because they don't need a visa.
So are there certain sectors within manufacturing that are especially well suited for Puerto Rican talent?
We do it all. I've catered to all different industries, but food and beverage, metal, we get a lot of welders out of Puerto Rico, electricians.
You need them. Get more.
Yep. Yeah. Skilled labor, a lot of skilled labor, carpenters, warehouse workers. We do it all.
So how is, and you mentioned the no needing of visas and all the red tape that is less, but are there other benefits that make recruiting from Puerto Rico different or easier than sourcing international talent?
Yeah, the number one is what you just said, Lisa, is that no visas needed, no red tape. Typically, my catch line is, if you need 10 to 20 employees, I can have them working for you within about 2 to 4 weeks. And a job seeker from Puerto Rico could hop on a flight at any moment to come over and work in the United States. I don't like to rush people. It does take time. You want to gain trust from the job seeker. That's a really important thing for me. But yeah, there's no red tape. But the biggest thing is, once they get here, transferring their driver's license if they're driving, if they have a car. But transferring a driver's license from Puerto Rico to whatever state they're in is almost as easy as transferring a driver's license from California to Kentucky or whatever state you're in.
So when it comes to, you mentioned building relationships, how are you meeting the people that you were working with? How are you vetting them? How's that process work?
Sure. Because I've been doing this for so long, Lisa, almost 12 years, a lot of it is word of mouth. A lot of these employees trust me. They call me for their next job opportunity. But a lot of that started and still does start from job fairs that we will put on. And then eventually it turns into word of mouth. But we'll go down to Puerto Rico and we'll rent out an entire hotel and do job fairs or just different media types of marketing. And just really understanding the culture helps a lot too. Understanding where they're coming from in the island, understanding their type of Spanish, because Puerto Rican Spanish is very different than other types of Spanish. So them understanding that myself and my team understand that kind of stuff makes them trust us. And trust is just a huge part of it. But I would say, to answer your question, a lot of it is eventually word of mouth because we've been doing this for so long.
So what about is there a big language barrier when they are coming over from Puerto Rico, or do a lot of them also speak English, or what does that look like?
Sure. A lot of the job seekers do speak enough English to get by, but I can't say that all of them are fluent. I would probably guess around 20 to 30% of the workforce that we recruit for manufacturing companies speaks conversational or fluent or conversational. And then another half kind of speaks basic enough to get by. And then there's maybe 20% that doesn't speak any at all. And with technology now, the more and more I do this, I talk to companies all the time, operations managers, HR managers, they're getting by with AI and translators, and whether in-person translators or also just apps and things like that.
Yeah, it's so funny. I was in Mexico in January. And again, like I told you before we started, I have no talent for other languages. So when I wanted to speak something in Spanish, I would go to DeepL. And if it was a short enough sentence, I would attempt to say it. And most of the time, they actually knew what I was saying. And then she would respond to me with Google Translate or whatever. So
that's wild.
Really was such a unique experience of being able to, for me, attempt the language.
Yeah.
But just be able to really, it doesn't matter where in the world you are, because you have all of these different AI tools like at your disposal.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's good that you're trying. Whatever tool you're using, at least you're trying. It's better than nothing.
Exactly.
And people appreciate that. It's fun. It's a fun thing.
Exactly. Just like being in the middle of Mexico and expecting the people that we're there to speak English. It's no, we're in your country.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
So, yeah.
So what does a typical rollout look like when a manufacturer starts working with you, from the initial conversation, boots on the ground? So what's the timeline?
Sure.
If you prepare for?
Yeah, an ideal timeline from the very first conversation until workers arrive and begin working. Realistically, I would say 3 to 4 weeks. The biggest reason is because of the need to secure housing, which I will get to. So the very first thing is just to figure out if this is a good fit. Can they provide enough hours? The job seekers that I recruit typically want at least 40 hours a week. And then they'll send me their job descriptions and I'll make sure that it looks good. And then the next thing is that helps identify the talent. I do all of the vetting, all of the interviewing, all of the recruiting, background checks, etc. And then the client, which is the companies, the factories, manufacturers, they need to secure furnished housing at a reasonable cost for the job seekers, for the recruits, because the demographic of people that I recruit typically can't come to the States, just figure it out immediately. It takes time. It's a helping hand from the manufacturers or the companies. They will find furnished housing and then deduct that from the paychecks of the workers. In terms of the flights, and some of the people from Puerto Rico are already in the States. They could be in any other state working and they're just looking for a better opportunity. But if they are coming, wherever they're coming from, typically the clients, the companies will pay for their flights and then deduct it from their paychecks. That's typically how it works. Or sometimes the workers will pay for it, which is also a good approach. And then once they arrive, they need to have some type of transportation, and the employer typically does provide that as well. And then there needs to be a great orientation and training, which I help set up virtually, but give my advice, because you don't want to just throw people to the wolves. These are professionals that are coming from a faraway place, and for them to feel secure, they need a good rollout plan of orientation and training, etc.
And do a lot of them come just by themselves, or do they bring their families with them, or they come in groups like a cohort that you would put in one place?
Yeah. Typically, most groups are around like 6 to 10. The minimum that I would recruit for is 4, but most are like groups of 6 to 10, but we've also done as much as 100. But typically the housing is only for employees. And so that's why
Okay.
not that I have anything against families, but gets very complicated. You can't have housing provided for people that aren't working if these companies are providing housing. Now,
Right.
that doesn't mean that if a worker comes and the companies are providing housing, that if the company says, "Hey, I really like this employee, he wants to bring his wife and his kids," and then the employer somehow helps them do that. I've seen that happen. I've seen it all happen. I've seen companies do some beautiful things, heartwarming situations where they'll use company trucks to help go to a secondhand store and get furniture or help move things for them, and really help set people up for success and make it more sustainable.
Well, and that sounds like a lot of the things you just said in my next question, but are there other tips that you would give to manufacturers who really want this to be a long-term success with these employees?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say just being very patient and flexible, understanding that just like most workforce alternatives, you learn as you go and it doesn't just take off immediately. It's a roller coaster. And sometimes you learn as you go and you learn from your mistakes. And that would be my biggest thing. And just understanding that people are coming from a faraway place and they're all going to miss their family and there's going to be misunderstandings, and misunderstandings can be avoided. You're never going to not have misunderstandings. But my biggest thing is do as much as possible to avoid misunderstandings. And a lot of that starts with having a thorough job description that you know exactly what you're getting into. When the workers show up, go through what their paycheck is going to look like, what's being deducted, why are they in certain taxes in certain states are different. Taxes here are very different than they are in Puerto Rico. Even though Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory, the taxes are different. So going through their paychecks, if you're doing deductions, going through the deductions, and just, like I said, avoiding those misunderstandings.
That's so interesting. I have a whole program on onboarding and how important that is, but that kind of throws something else completely into the equation, because it's not only going through the benefits and making them feel included and welcomed and all of that, but then also that level of understanding that, yeah, this person did come from afar away and they don't know anybody and they left their families behind, perhaps, and all of these things of just really working with people who have that different level of understanding and are willing to do that.
Yep, 100%. Yeah. And that's great. I'm sure that is a great tool that you've created, and that's super important. I think because a lot of these companies, and when I say these companies, I don't mean just manufacturers, any company that is struggling with labor, any industry that struggles with labor, they might be struggling to reach their quotas or they're losing revenue. So when they do get access to a certain talent pool, a unique talent pool, I can tell that a lot of them are very eager to get them to work. That's why I'm always like, slow down. Like you said, focus on the onboarding, focus on the training. Onboarding alone could be a full day, and then the training is the next day. It's all different. Onboarding could include all the paperwork, the safety paperwork, going through the apartment, understanding where they're living, understanding the community, introducing them to people, filling out the I-9, the W-2, all that kind of stuff. And then the next day is like the actual skills training, right?
Yeah. So can you share a story or two of companies that you've worked with that you have seen results using this approach?
Yeah. So one of my clients a long time ago, they were in the middle of Michigan and they kind of in the middle of nowhere, losing revenue, low on production, but they had so many requests coming in. They came to me and they took their time. They went out and they found and secured good housing. They came up with a good program. It took time, but like an onboarding program. And over time, they recruited dozens of employees, and many of them are still there today. And that makes me super happy, when companies will call me, or not companies, when job seekers, recruits in the past will text me or call me and say, "Hey, Clay, thanks so much. I'm still here. You recruited me a long time ago. I just want to say thank you. I moved my family here permanently." And those are the types of stories that I love. And it's cool that a lot of these job seekers don't forget. I'm not saying all of their success isn't because of me, but I was the first person that helped bridge that gap. And then after that, they took it on themselves to continue to create a solid living in a completely foreign place and bring their families. That would be one success story. I've worked with Fortune 500 companies as well. And I just think the biggest thing is looking at this as a program. If you're starting to recruit a different talent pool, a lot of people might do ex-cons or different communities or refugees, people from Puerto Rico, whatever it is. It's not just recruiting. You're creating a new program. And especially if you're helping relocate people, that comes with a lot of operating procedures, and it's a process. And so the most successful companies are the ones that recognize that and take their time.
Yeah. I have to laugh because think about the people who experience great weather, well, except for hurricanes, year round, and then coming to a Michigan winter for the first time. I'm in Cleveland, Ohio. Get that?
Sure.
So what are those stories like when they come?
Yeah, I've had some guys get off the airplane midwinter in like somewhere in Cleveland with a t-shirt and jeans on. And like, you try to prepare them as much as possible. Or if you're like, hey, you're going to need like winter gear, maybe they have just like a hoodie. And that's kind of part of it. That's where my expertise comes in. The more I do this, the more I make sure to have a checklist and tell people what to expect, what they need. I have checklists, not just for the job seekers, but also for the employers. So both sides are set up for success. You're always going to miss something, but the longer you do this, just like in your profession, the more you do things, the more you come up with, the more you learn and try to provide as much information as possible.
Yeah. So how are the workers tending to view these roles? So are they looking at them more as short-term stepping stones or long-term career opportunities?
Sure. Yeah, it's a mix. Some people from Puerto Rico are just looking for a seasonal job, maybe March until November, and they want to make money, save money, and then go back to Puerto Rico and then come back the next season and work for the exact same company again. And then the company will maybe learn a lot about the process, and it's even better the next year. And then they get more referrals, and it all works out that way. Or there's some companies that are like, hey, we want people to come here long term, which I completely believe in. But to get someone to move from Puerto Rico, it's not like they can commit immediately without ever going somewhere. Hey, I'm going to come and work there forever. But it happens. And a lot of people want those long-term solutions and sustainable job opportunities, but it's also comes with like great benefits. People want to work with the companies that are going to pay well and treat people well and have a great company culture.
Yeah. So what are some of the mistakes that manufacturers make when trying to implement a solution like this, but they do it on their own?
I think one would be just like trying to go down to Puerto Rico and, oh, we have a Spanish speaker on our team. We'll just go down there and do it. Try it. I'm not saying that wouldn't work, but there's so much trust that goes into this. It's really understanding the culture, understanding the people. And a lot of it is just trust, because a lot of companies have tried to go down to Puerto Rico and do this on their own. And unfortunately, there have been a lot of bad experiences on the job seekers from Puerto Rico have maybe been taken advantage of or had bad experiences. And so then they have their guard up. And it's just, that would be one, is just kind of like going down there without a plan and trying to do it on your own. Other ones, people that don't have the housing set up great. If you're helping bring someone and kind of helping relocate them and charging them for housing and everything, you want housing that has adequate furniture and bedding. And that's part of my process. I make sure that they do that. But some clients, they'll send me a picture and, hey, this is the housing, and it's disgusting. That's not appropriate. So I'm not saying that's everyone. That's just one. But yes, those are some of the mistakes.
Sure.
So those are two that come to mind. And then the other ones are just companies that, like I was saying before, are so desperate to increase their production that they just throw employees to the wolves immediately without any training, without any orientation, that never works. Yeah.
So what does support then from Isla Talent look like after the initial placement?
Great question. Ongoing support, ongoing translation. I call it HR mediation. So not necessarily anyone's manager, but the job seekers from Puerto Rico will come to me with issues or problems. They trust me. And so I take that information. So if a job seeker says, hey, this one supervisor, I don't really like the way he talks to us. And then I'll call the other job seeker, the other recruits from Puerto Rico, and they say, yeah, he's not treating us really well. Then I'll take that to the company and say, hey, let's work on this. What's going on? Where's the misunderstanding? Whose fault is this? And I take everything I hear with a grain of salt. I'm in HR, I know you are as well. And if you have to take everything you hear with a grain of salt. So I just try to be that mediator and just mediate these situations to make everyone happy. And like I was saying before, avoid the misunderstanding. So I do keep in touch with both the companies and the job seekers for typically a year after placement.
Okay. So as we're getting to the end of our time together, what is one myth or misconception that you'd like to bust when it comes to hiring Puerto Rican workers?
The biggest is that they need a visa. It's so simple, but everyone, like I'll have companies I'll say, oh yeah, I recruit job seekers from Puerto Rico, no visas needed. And they'll literally say, so how do they get the visa? And I say, no visas needed. And they're like, I don't get it. I'm like, they're US citizens. That is the biggest one.
Wow.
Yes. That's not as exciting as of an answer you might have thought, but people still don't understand. Even though I say it, they're US citizens, they don't need a visa. I will still get some that ask, where do they get the visa? So that's the biggest misconception.
Is there anything that I didn't ask you but should have? Because we covered so much, and I just want to make sure, because I think about the worker shortage that everybody is experiencing, and you mentioned a couple different areas for non-traditional workforce, hiring felons, focusing on women and underserved communities. And this is one more way of getting people to do the work that we need, especially welders. Is there anything else at all that would be helpful?
Sure. My biggest one, Lisa, would be what I call retention incentives. And that could be with any workforce, not just people from Puerto Rico. But as with the issues that we see in different industries with workforce, it's people coming and taking a job and working for 2 months and then they quit, 3 months and they quit. And I've found it very successful to come up with retention incentives where it's maybe, for example, hey, we're going to pay you, just for example, we're going to pay you $19 an hour. But once you've completed 4 months, we're going to bump you up to $20 an hour and give you $1 for every hour you worked during that time period as like a bonus and a kind of a back pay. And I like to call that a retention incentive. It's so basically you're making that as long as you stay. And it's like telling job seekers, put your money where your mouth is. If you say you're going to stay and you're going to work, then if you do it, you're going to get this bonus. That's what you were getting. That was your hourly rate the entire time. So pretty much any type of bonus, those are things that I'm really, and unique bonuses. If you live in a city where maybe there's a big sports team, it's, hey, if you finish 6 months on this job, then we're going to give you these tickets or something that's really worth it. I mean, I don't want to give any examples of things that I don't think are worth it because I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but a lot of companies like, we do this and we do that, but it's like, at the end of the day, people are motivated by money and time off. I think those were two biggest things.
Well, and being treated like they matter and that they're and they're part of the team, the whole workplace culture.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's one of my biggest questions is, hey, what makes you unique? What is your company culture? And some people get really nervous when you ask them that question. And that's not a good sign for me. I like companies that are very confident. And like you said, treating people like a person, not like a number, and really valuing them as a human being and just understanding where they're coming from and taking time to do that. It all takes patience.
Yep.
Excuse me.
Bless you. So if somebody did want to continue the conversation with you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
I would say the best way is my LinkedIn page, which I can send you if you want to put that in the show notes. And then my website is recruitingpuertorico.com.
Okay. All right, Clay, it has been a pleasure having you on the show today. Thanks so much for joining me.
All right. Thanks, Lisa. I appreciate it.
I'm Lisa Ryan, and this is the Manufacturers Network Podcast. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Manufacturers Network Podcast. Do me a favor and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues so we can grow this network and connect more fantastic folks just like you. You can either send your buddies to the website at manufacturers-network.com or share the Manufacturers Network podcast on your LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or wherever you and your industry friends hang out. The bigger and faster we grow the network, the stronger and deeper the community we'll all have. Thanks again, and I appreciate you.